manufacturing's hard. There's all sorts of challenges that come up, and you do need to be collaborative and dynamic and solutions oriented, and it's hard, especially if you're making, hundreds and thousands of SKUs. It's definitely important to have machine utilization. Thank you, Peter, for joining us, and we're excited to have you on the podcast today. It sounds like you have a rich manufacturing background, and with over 20 years of experience. Can you tell us a little bit about what's going on in New Jersey manufacturing today? What are some of the challenges, and what are some of the things that you're excited about in the state, and what's going on in New Jersey?
Sure. Let me give you a little bit of my background. So I spent 40 years in the aerospace and defense industry, mostly in business development, but the last 15 years running manufacturing companies. So manufacturing's in my blood. I've been doing it for a while. I always like to say I was a client of NJMEP, became a board member, chairman of the board, and then became CEO. So NJMEP brings a big track record for us. And what we do is there's one of us in every state and 51 of us in Puerto Rico. And our goal is working with small, medium manufacturers in each state. I'll take one of our biggest manufacturers is Campbell Soup. We don't deal with Campbell Soup. They can do everything we do. But Campbell's deals with us to go to their supply chain and help them with issues because we're better attuned of dealing with that 25 to 250 person company than they are. So that's what we do. Our goal is, we go into the trenches with companies, going and look at the issues that they have. And on a consulting basis, we assist them on how they get better. And our goal is, one, to make them more profitable, and two, more important, stay in New Jersey. So there's a lot of issues, and I think it's across the board when you talk to individual states. What's the biggest issue, which I think we'll probably hit on a couple of things. Uncertainty is a big issue that we talk with companies. They have no clue. Do we have tariffs today? Do we not have tariffs today? And looking at your company, I know you deal with China and Vietnam, and it can change daily. And how do you talk to your customers, and how do you do that? And workforce development is probably the second issue. And how do you? There's probably 40,000 open manufacturing jobs in New Jersey across about the 11,000 small medium manufacturers. And our goal is, how do we help companies? And when companies come to us and say they need help, we're not going to go to the company next door and say, "Oh, hire this guy and bring him over." That doesn't solve the problem. What we're trying to do is working with high schools and community colleges of training the next generation workforce to fill those roles. So I think those are probably the key issues that we see in New Jersey. In New Jersey, probably the other big issue is red tape. We have significant amount of red tape of getting through state issues of, green lands and brown lands, and just getting through all that red tape. It's New Jersey needs to fix that.
That's interesting, and sounds like you're very passionate and experienced with the organization that you're now leading there, and worked with it in all capacities. So that's a
joke that I was a board member and I missed a meeting, and next thing you know, I was chairman of the board. So the board meetings.
I can relate with some community boards I've been involved with. So you were voluntold into the role. I like it. Now, when it comes to the workforce development, I do feel like, a lot of the world is facing demographic issues. When people industrialize, usually the birth rates decline. And I know that really there's a lot of retirements in the workforce that, largely we're facing domestically. And thankfully, the boomers had a lot of children, and the millennials are replacing. So we're actually a lot better off than a lot of countries. But I think what you mentioned is key, and the places and regions that are doing what you're talking about with the workforce development, with the high schools, with the technical colleges, and those partnerships between public and private entities, really kind of developing that pipeline all the way through. Those regions are going to be stronger off and better equipped for, the future that's coming. So can you talk a little bit about what that pipeline looks like in New Jersey and those partnerships?
Sure. So, there's a term called the silver tsunami, which 10,000 boomers retire every day. And how do you replace them? How do you replace them in a workforce? And it's not easy. And after COVID, things have changed. People want a different work environment. They want to work from home. They want to go to the office and play ping pong. They wanted to go to the office and there's a bar in the office. My daughter works in New York City and there's a bar in her office. And then Wednesday is bar day, bar afternoon day. Manufacturing facilities, you can't do that. And I tell a funny story is I was hiring a machinist in my prior career. And he goes, I want to work from home sometimes. I go, you're a machinist. You can't work from home. You have to work on a machine. And it's a different paradigm, and companies have to address that. Part of what we're looking at is, and two things, as I said, workforce development. And we have a program in New Jersey where we're going to a high school in every county called Makers and Creators. And we have a tricked out RV with manufactured equipment. It's got CNC machines. It's got 3D printers, virtual welding machines, 3D printers, I think I said. We've got a bunch of equipment. And we bring it to schools. We bring it to parents' night, back to school nights. We bring it to school board meetings to teach, not the students as much now, but parents and school teachers that there's a career in manufacturing, not a job, a career. And now we're a team with Junior Achievement to take that to middle schools because we think we're a little too late when we're in high schools. So those are some of the things we're doing. But the other things that we talk with companies on is retention of employees is key. It's much easier keeping an employee than it is to train them. And little things matter. You don't think that $1 an hour matters, but it does matter. And in New Jersey, you can go work at Dunkin' Donuts for $20 an hour. And manufacturing companies, well, I only pay 17. I said, well, you're going to lose them to Dunkin' Donuts. So, so part of that is educating small, medium manufacturers that it's much cheaper to keep an employee than it is to train them.
Mm-hmm. Are there other perks that you've seen manufacturers get creative with outside of the $1 an hour?
Again, back off a shed. I mean, even NJMEP, we have a one day work from home, and it makes a difference for people. They're working, but they're at home. In the summer, we do half day Fridays because you know what? I run a manufacturing company. Don't come see me on a Friday afternoon, especially in the summer. Just don't. So, we give them that little perk, but companies are looking at doing different things. They're looking at taking them to minor league baseball games. They're, something that's outside the norm. On a Wednesday, I've heard of manufacturing companies, okay, we're all going at bowling. Just do something and spur of the moment. Kids are looking for something different. Say kids, the millennials and Gen Zs, and they want something. They want to have a life. Our parents didn't. We worked. It was one job, two jobs, and things are different, and we've got to be fluid on how we do it.
Well said, and definitely important. I know we've seen some trends where just in general, there's more manufacturing work than workers to do them. Thankfully, at Polo, we've got some states where we're able to hire more and expand our facilities, and capacity is not an issue for us, and we're able to scale up in a way that's lucky from from what I read in the trends and probably what's going on in New Jersey. But their retention is a really important point, and turnover is always expensive anyways. And it is hard to recruit talent in a lot of places. So
I spent 35 years with the same company, and we moved the business, we moved our division to Fort Walton Beach, Florida, and I wasn't going to go anyhow, but I wasn't offering to go. But when you started talking to a headhunter, an executive search, they go, well, we don't like this. You were at the same company for 35 years. I go, I thought there was something good. Oh, no, we like to see you bounce around a little bit. I said, well, I had a bunch of different positions in the company. No, we would have liked you to see it. And I'm like, it sort of took me by surprise.
Yeah.
That's gave my all to for 35 years, and that wasn't what people were looking for.
That's funny because it's the opposite is true too. If they're just bouncing around every year or two, it's like you could take credit for your predecessor's work and act like you did something,
I used to see a lot of resumes and I go, okay, every 2 years the person left. Why do I want to train the person? In 2 years he's going to leave again on me.
It's a red flag. Absolutely. Well, it seems like innovation and technology is something that's just changing by the day. And it seems like, you at NJMEP you guys are on top of this. And so what are some of the ways that you work with manufacturers in the area to really make an impact? And I ask that selfishly too. I mean, we've looked at automation for really big product lines and things that have the volumes to really return an ROI. But I think there's also smaller things that you could do to start automating different steps or processes. And so what would you suggest for smaller and medium manufacturers when it comes to exploring new technologies and how you think about adopting them?
Sure. So again, automation is key. And depending, most of our companies can't do the big automation programs. You're probably a larger company where you can automate a number of your products. What we see is robotics taking a much more coming to the forefront of companies starting to use robots for welding, for different things, for putting stuff on machines. We're seeing that robots scare me a little bit at times, but and I think we deal mostly with cobots, and I can't tell you the difference between a robot and a cobot, but we're seeing that more and more, and in small manufacturers, really small, like 10 people, they're getting cobots. Downside is people think the robot's going to take my job. It doesn't. It actually creates new jobs because it allows them to do other things. Additive manufacturing is key. 3D printers and being able to do things. I bought our first 3D printer for the defense company in 2005, and it won me a $15 million contract just by buying the 3D printing. And what happened is, put in our proposal, and this was the defense business, and the customer came in to review our proposal. What we did was we made recorders, made a recorder out of the 3D recorder. The meeting became, can we change this knob to a handle? Can we change this to do this? I looked at my chief engineer and said, we got the job. They're now redesigning the product. But if we hadn't put it on the table, they would have just talked about, the proposal and what you thought. Like whomping it up on the table, again, a New Jersey term, it won the program. So additive manufacturing, 3D printers is taking a big step. So is AI, but AI is scaring me, especially with AI and robots. But what we're seeing with AI for manufacturers is machine maintenance, predictive maintenance, where they can put that into, take the data that comes off of the machine, put it into AI, and the machine says, okay, make sure you're changing the oil next week. Make sure you're changing your bits. Make sure you're doing, and we're finding companies that is becoming a big part of their business, a big part of their production process.
I've heard a lot about that. Is that with additive sensors, or is that usually just built into some of the machinery that you're seeing, and it's the data that's processed through AI?
It's the data that's processed through AI. So, a lot of, whether it's a CNC machine, whether it's presses, they're all sort of there's a computer base where you can download how often the machine is used, the different parameters, and then you can flow that into whatever AI system you're using. And we're seeing that really taking off.
And can you touch on like a practical example of how you've seen a manufacturer use a cobot that, maybe helped the process but didn't replace any jobs?
Yes. So it's a fastener company, to be honest.
But before we get into that, this podcast is brought to you by Polo Custom Products. We are a custom manufacturer that specializes in sewing, sealing, and thermoforming. We work with project engineers, sourcing professionals, and buyers to design, engineer, and manufacture products that cannot afford to fail. If you're interested in working with us, visit our website at www.polocustomproducts.com and fill out a request for quote form. Now, back to the show.
Yes. So it's a fastener company, to be honest. And the cobot so they were machining a product. And so the cobot would just keep moving the raw material onto the machine that would then, machine it. And it just did it. And then that allowed that employee to go off and do some other things. Monitor it, because you have to keep monitoring it. And again, what ends up happening, now you're starting to see cameras that start to view for quality management on stuff. But that's probably a real world example of, it's like a screw manufacturer. So it just would load the machine.
Nice.
You see it in packaging. Mm-hmm. As stuff comes off the product line, you see it in warehouses of packaging that material, and then somebody else just has to tape it up and do, but it fills the box up.
Do you work with a lot of custom manufacturers in New Jersey, and what do you see, particularly in those markets with custom manufacturers that might be working for Campbell's, for instance, like the example you said before?
Campbell's is more food that we deal with. So we're dealing more with farms and different things. Most of the companies we deal are custom. And we go from medical devices, which you do, to aerospace and defense. We do a lot of food quality systems for companies. But customs products is, you have to be collaborative, you have to be quick, and you have to be dynamic on the floor. You can't set up your machine and just let it run. You're taking it down, resetting it up for a different product line. And the key that we've always talked to companies when they're doing that is planning is key, that you have to plan of what products are coming on and what products are similar that goes onto what machine, and you want to reduce the amount of downtime on those machines. So, that's what we see is, basically with the low volume custom work, having standardized setups for those custom products, and then being able to modify them for whatever comes in afterwards.
Well said. I definitely think that resonates with us. And, I always joke around that manufacturing's hard. There's all sorts of challenges that come up, and you do need to be collaborative and dynamic and solutions oriented, and it's hard, especially if you're making hundreds and thousands of SKUs. It's definitely important to have machine utilization. What have you seen in terms of like development processes when you're working with these custom manufacturers? What are some of the best practices that you see with the companies that are really doing it well when they're maybe planning and setting up for a new line and working collaboratively with a customer to launch a product into the world?
I think there's two things. It's two C's: collaboration and communication. And, the new product development, there's that old comic of this is what the salesman sold, this is what engineering built, and this is what manufacturing built. And it comes out totally different. That's what we see with customers talking, especially in custom, is one, if their design team is not with them, meaning they're outsourcing their design, and engineering, you need that collaboration and that communication. And that is the biggest thing that we're seeing in the developmental process in the beginning. And then what you need to make sure is that you really ask questions, and with that, before you start making anything, really sit down and put everybody, all the principals at the table, manufacturing, engineering, sales, your development team, R&D team, and really go through your drawings and what the process is. We've seen too many times where they're out in the floor and you're starting to wing it. Man,
yeah.
And I'm sure you go through that.
Oh yeah.
You've got places in China, Vietnam, and how do you communicate? They manufacturing. I'm sure you do most of the design here in the U.S. and they manufacture. But you're 12 to 13 hours difference. You have a language difference, and are they building everything that you wanted to do, and quality-wise also? So it ain't easy.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's half the battle. Is, I mean, it's like you want the cross-functional team, you want all the communication, and then you got a lot of people in a lot of meetings. And it's amazing, but it is an amazing process. I mean, it takes a lot of smart people working with another team of smart people on our customers' ends, really making sure that you're nailing every aspect of design, of detail, of, how you measure this and what we're going to document in this process, and how that's phrased. I mean, it's incredible to see all the smart engineers and designers come together to bring something important into the world. But I think that transitions well over into our next topic here, which is quality management and regulatory compliance. I know if we're talking globally too, there's usually a trend in which, something might pass in Europe and then maybe gets adopted in California, and then we're seeing it in the US. And so I'm curious if you've seen any trends, with the different companies that you work with, and if there's anything in particular that you're seeing happening, or that manufacturers can act on to be ahead of the curve.
Every industry has some standards, and yours is medical devices. I think the 13485. There's the same thing in food. There's FSMAs, and so there's always quality standards that people need to look at. And they need to adopt them and look at them and follow them. So when you look at ISO or AS9100, which is a aerospace and defense, basically tells you what you need to do, but you lay out how you need to do it. But you need to make sure that you follow your own processes that meet those specifications. And it can't just be a quality inspector and a quality manager. You have to put that down to the operator of a machine that says, this is the standard you need to do. Lean is the biggest thing that we preach to most companies. And lean is a continuous process. Just because you leaned once doesn't mean you stop. You need to further have Kaizen events or 5S events. And people go, we already did that last year. Well, no, do it again. This was your current state. What's your future state? Now we're going to take that future state, what's your current state, and what's your next future state? And when we go into companies, it's always the finance guy that'll fight you and goes, no, I don't want to move machines. No, if you move machines, it's going to make your flow better. No, you guys don't know what you're talking about. And then 4 months later, he goes, holy cow, my operating income is going up because we're saving time doing things. And so it's a process that people need to know. That's the trend that we see and what we find is it's the smaller companies are adopting to that quicker because they have less people. And if the GM and CEO foster it, it gets fostered over them.
Mm-hmm. Fascinating. Yeah, that's That's a really great point. And it kind of segues well into our next topic, which for maybe one of those smaller, medium-sized manufacturers that's growing, how do you consult with them on optimizing operations and managing some significant growth? I mean, especially potentially with workforce constraints or equipment constraints. How do you approach helping a company in that situation?
I've been in hundreds of manufacturers. I can walk a floor and see issues right away. But what we do is when we walk into the facility, we take a fresh look at the business. We spend time talking to the people and don't judge, and then come back and say, here's our assessment. There's some issues in shop floor management. There's issues in, to be honest, sometimes English as a second language. One of our biggest courses we're teaching now is Spanish as a second language. So managers can understand their employees. But so it's a client engagement, and then we create a roadmap with them. And again, that roadmap is just not sitting with the GM or CEO, it's sitting with the quality manager, it's with the production floor manager, it's with the CFO, and say, here's the roadmap. And the first step always usually comes out to lead. Could be OSHA. OSHA is, especially with small companies, OSHA is a big issue. We walk in and I let, you've got a machine here that's not safe. And they go, what do you mean? It's a press. You need to have a metal barrier between them. And they're like, you know what you're talking about. Okay. Yeah, we do, and then, we help, again, automation, usually on a smaller scale. And then we look at cobots. And those are the type, and again, workforce development. We tend to look at, is the staff aging? Are they training new employees, or do they just sort of keep them off to the side? Is the gray beard the guy that knows everything, that it's not on the drawing, but he knows what to do? Is he passing that knowledge on? And you see a lot of that too. And that's, that's just a factor of people trying to keep their jobs. They're like, oh, well, if I teach the young guy, I'm going to be out of a job. And you have to teach companies that you don't want to do that. You want to make that person the mentor. Yeah,
and I mean, what if that person gets sick? It's like you want them to take time off and not be getting called and take a vacation. And
we saw that during COVID.
Right.
I ran a company. We lost two of our senior guys, and before that, we had trouble separating the employees during lunchtime. We're setting up things in between the presses so they wouldn't do. But then they'd be together on weekends. And I'm like, you can't do this. And two employees passed away. And all of a sudden the light went on and they started separating at lunch. We started, at that point, you're taking temperatures of people. If you have a cough, don't come in. But this is in the height of COVID. Just don't come in. We'll pay you. But you're scaring other people. It's changed. But the point back is the amount of tribal knowledge we lost with those two gentlemen took us months to gain back.
Yeah, I believe it. And heard a sad example of a company that had a small company plane and 4 executives on it, and they, got in an accident, and the company tanked because there wasn't any backup for the 4 people and all the institutional knowledge that they held. So
you go to Lockheed Martins and they don't let the executives fly together like that anymore.
Right. Yeah, we have a risk policy that says we are not to do that as well. So that we're getting close to time here, Peter. Is there anything else that we should be asking you that you think our audience would benefit from hearing from?
So you mentioned manufacturing isn't easy. And it's funny, that's very my cheat, but that was one of my closing remarks. Manufacturing isn't easy. And you need to continuously innovate and then I think my other point, don't underestimate people, your people. You may have the best product in the world, but if you can't source it, you can't build it, and can't ship it, doesn't mean anything. So I would say, I use it as the 3 Ps: people, people, people. All the other stuff we can solve. So it's sort of my closing remark.
Oh, that was great. And we really appreciate your time, Peter. You're a wealth of knowledge, and I wish we had more time with you. So we might have to call you back for round 2, but really appreciate it.
That'll be fine. And no need to edit. I think I'm good. It's I like the conversational aspect of it.
Well, me too, and really appreciate it. And I think you brought a lot of value to a lot of people. So we'll be in touch.
I hope so. Take care.
All right, you too.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care.